The proof is in the pudding. So it really depends on their behavior and on their actions and ultimately their policies. It's one thing to make those pledges at this stage. It's another thing then to actually execute and implement those. I think it's going to be a big test for the Taliban to prove to the rest of the world and prove to the Afghan people that they have changed, that they are not the Taliban of the 1990s, that they mean well, that they actually care about the Afghan people, that they care about men and women and girls going to school, that they care about the youth that make up 80% of the country, that they care about the Afghan economy and security and stability and all of that. We do know that the Taliban, for example, have a harsh justice system, but it has to be used judiciously and it has to be used within a certain framework that people can adhere to. And at the end of the day, I think they need to also respect some of the freedoms and liberties that Afghans deserve as Muslims as well as citizens of that country, like the freedom to express themselves, the freedom to move. So all of that is very important, and it's a big test for the Taliban. Yes, we've heard those narratives. We just need to see how it's going to translate into action.
So it's a test for the Taliban, but thinking of the people of Afghanistan right now, who may well be watching these images, they were assured they would be safe by Ashraf Ghani, who has now left the country. What next for the Afghan people, especially those women and girls who might worry that they might not be able to go back to school or go back to work?
See, the first test is to see if the Taliban are actually amenable to a political settlement that is inclusive and that is broad-based. If they are, then that is the beginning of a flexibility and compromise that they can show in other areas such as women's rights and girls going to school and to universities. They have come out in the past few days in different provinces of Afghanistan and also in Kabul saying girls can go to school and they can go to higher educational institutions. They can work, women can work. They have said it. But we now need that, as I said, to be translated into policy. But the first challenge is going to be how to create this transition, this interim period. Is it going to be a purely Taliban period, or is it going to be a broad-based power-sharing arrangement that others can also feel they are part of? And if the Taliban are smart and they have learned the lessons of history, I think that they're better served having a broad-based, inclusive system rather than the rigid Taliban system.
OK, Omar Samad, great to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Al Jazeera News Hour. Omar Samad, former Afghan ambassador and advisor to top official Abdullah. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's bring in our diplomatic editor, James Bays, now. He was reporting from Kabul until last week and joins us now from UN headquarters in New York. We'll talk about the UN in just a moment, James, but our viewers are still being shown these images from inside the presidential palace in Kabul. These are arresting images, are they not?
I mean, for someone like me who's been reporting from Afghanistan for 20 years now, I was there before the Taliban fell in 2001, before the American Special Forces arrived on the ground in Afghanistan, and just one reaction: wow. I mean, to see the Taliban, and these are actually fighting Taliban, they're not Taliban leadership, these are Taliban fighters, they're in the presidential palace, sitting in the president's desk, some of them lounging elsewhere in the office, in the armchairs where President Ghani used to meet other world leaders and dignitaries. These are amazing scenes. I'm told elsewhere in Kabul, elsewhere outside the presidential palace, they are now flying the Taliban flag. This has happened happened so fast. As you say, I was in Afghanistan just 8 days ago. I certainly wouldn't have left if I knew things were going to move this fast. And it is really quite amazing after the whole 20-year investment of the West in Afghanistan. Just the US alone spent $144 billion. That's from a US government report in Afghanistan, and for what? There'll be questions asked about the failures here. Forget about whether it was right or wrong to withdraw the US troops. The way it was done, was there a massive intelligence failure? Did the US not predict the Taliban would move so fast? Was there a massive military failure? Because remember, the US military trained the Afghan forces. What did they not understand about that? I think it was the psychological blow of the announcement of the pullout, the fact the Afghan government had made no preparations for the pullout, the fact the US system with the Afghans, effectively the US military were the officers and the Afghans were the soldiers, and when the officers pulled out, the soldiers didn't know what to do. I also think the US was still looking at a map of Afghanistan that was made up of provinces and districts, and of course the Taliban were looking at a tribal map and speaking to all the key tribal players and getting them to change sides. And lastly, what a diplomatic failure. All those talks in Doha, the US strategy in those talks proved, I think, to be not the right strategy at all. They took the Taliban on trust that the Taliban, once they pulled out their forces, would negotiate with the Afghan government, that they'd come up with a unity government. I don't think that President Trump, who started those negotiations, or President Biden were perhaps following the words that we used to hear from Ronald Reagan, that Russian proverb he used to always cite: trust but verify. The diplomatic fallout will be felt far and wide. You had the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the American television earlier, claiming that they've accomplished absolutely everything they had to. This was not a failure of any shape or form. It'd be interesting to see if he stands by those remarks, given the scenes that we're broadcasting here on Al Jazeera. Just in terms of where the UN stands on this, James, we understand that the UN Security Council are likely to be meeting to discuss this. It looks like they're going to have an awful lot to talk about, isn't there? Absolutely. The situation is moving so fast. There was a call earlier on for a Security Council meeting. Some council members, I think, have been slightly dragging their feet because they really don't know what's going on, and they're trying to find more information of exactly what the situation is so that they can have a proper discussion of it. The latest information is the Security Council meet in just under 12 hours from now. That'll be an open meeting, so you can guarantee we'll be broadcasting it here on Al Jazeera. And I'm hearing that the representative of the UN in Kabul, Deborah Lyons, will be briefing, but so will the UN Secretary General because of the gravity of the situation. The latest word on the ground from the UN is that they are not evacuating people at this stage. They are not doing any operations, though. All UN staff confined to their compound means no humanitarian work is going on. They are desperately worried about the security situation, as are many of these diplomatic missions, which are now scrambling to get their personnel out of Afghanistan. Remember, out of the 15 Security Council members, 6 of those countries were actually countries that had, at some point or other, soldiers in Afghanistan. And, of course, some of them, particularly the US and the UK, had very large numbers of soldiers in Afghanistan. We've seen pictures in the last couple of hours. The French ambassador already evacuated. There are reports that the US ambassador is also now left Kabul. We don't have that confirmed at this stage.
OK, certainly things are moving very, very fast indeed. James Baisdow, following events live from the United Nations in New York. Thank you very much. You never know, James, you may find yourself on a plane back to Afghanistan at this rate. But thank you very much indeed for bringing us that update from New York. Let's take you back to Kabul. Well, we're still showing our viewers those exclusive pictures from inside the presidential palace, where Al Jazeera has been live inside the palace with Taliban fighters have been speaking to our colleagues on Al Jazeera Arabic. We have also heard from certainly a palace official who was handing over the palace, control of the palace, to those Taliban fighters. Rob McBride, you've been following developments in Afghanistan, well, in Kabul, really all day. The day started with the stunning footage of diplomats being airlifted out of the US embassy in Kabul. Seems reminiscent of those the last chopper out of Saigon. I just got to stop there. What we're showing you, our viewers now, Rob, is images of the Afghan flag being taken down. That is, Taliban fighters have taken down the flag of Afghanistan inside the presidential palace. That flag has been rolled up and has been placed on a mantelpiece. We're doing a little show and tell from one of our colleagues there. But that's the Afghan flag inside the presidential palace has come down. Staggering stuff, Rob. As I say, the day started with those fairly surprising images, and the day in Kabul appears to be ending with images of a similar shocking and surprising quality.
That's right. It is incredible that these two things are happening also, almost in tandem or parallel, if you like. We're getting everything that's happening inside the presidential palace, and not far away, we're still having the continuing helicopters coming in and out of the US embassy. As you mentioned, they have been continuing since the start of day. In fact, since last night, you could hear the helicopters starting to work, and that has continued throughout the day. And that seems to be going on oblivious to what's happening in the presidential palace. Obviously, the United States is not oblivious, but it's simply concentrating on this one task. It is getting people from the embassy or from the embassy compound over to Hamid Karzai International Airport, to the part of the airport which is largely cut off from the outside world, and the US would like to keep it that way, where it's putting
Rob,
people on planes and getting them out.
Rob,
yes.
I'm going to cut you off there because we have now secured translation there. Let's listen in and hear what's going on inside the presidential palace.
12:15, when he's having lunch together with the officials. This is a piece of paper of the agenda of what is going to happen during Eid. Yes. Okay, this is sufficient for now.
So things are moving very fast, of course. Anyone following events throughout the day will have known that things have been moving very fast, very unpredictable. What we've just been watching is that's one of our colleagues from Al Jazeera Arabic who is inside the presidential palace with those Taliban fighters, basically doing a show and tell for our viewers in Arabic. So after that flag had been taken down, the flag of Afghanistan inside the Afghan presidential palace, we have been showing you some of the objects inside that room. We now have one of the fighters on the phone, clearly discussing those monumental events. This is the Taliban, of course, for very many viewers just joining us, who are inside the presidential palace in Kabul. One of the officials of the palace has officially handed the palace over to those Taliban fighters. There's a lot of chaos and confusion going on right now, but certainly those fighters are taking our colleague and cameraman throughout the palace, heading down some stairs there. Rob, you're following these images for us as well. We're getting a tour, it would appear, of the Afghan presidential palace. Astonishing footage, really. A very grand building. We're getting the tour of inside the presidential palace. Of course, the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, no longer there, but he has managed to communicate via Facebook saying that he has he left Kabul, rather, to avoid the bloodshed. How do you think that message will be received by the people of Kabul and the people of Afghanistan, who were assured by him?
Yeah, I mean, we're already getting some reaction to Ashraf Ghani's departure. I mean, we're getting, and it is not very complimentary. I mean, Dr. Abdullah, seen largely as his adversary in the Afghan government, he's said that that Ghani left to people in a bad position. God will make him accountable, but ultimately will judge him, it seems. We had the defense minister of Ghani's government saying that he tied the hands behind the back of the people and sold the homeland. That is not very complimentary. So we're already having some reaction to Ghani's departure. I just wanted to point to one thing that James Bay said earlier about the UN compound being locked down, UN people told to stay indoors. The UN, as we've reported quite a bit over the past week or so, is desperate to try to put into place various humanitarian programs and get out there and do its job, but it can only do that when it has a certain level of stability. Well, you know, that is now on this Taliban administration, whatever it looks like, because it seems as though they have, by hook or by crook, they have inherited power here. That is now on them to achieve. It's up to them to achieve stability. It's also, you know, they also now own this humanitarian problem, which arguably they have helped to contribute to. All the thousands of people who have been pouring into Kabul, trying to escape fighting in other parts of the country. So that also comes with taking power. It's not just taking down the flag, it's putting up your own flag and then taking on the responsibilities that go along with that.
OK, Rob McBride there with us following that continuing coverage. Thank you very much indeed.